Welcome, everyone, to the May 11th meeting of the Wards 1 and 8 Neighborhood Planning Assembly. I believe that we have 3 people here in the room. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Keith Pillsbury from University Terrace in Ward 8.
I'm Tom Darenthal. I'm the facilitator tonight. I'm from Ward 1.
Richard Ilya, Court, Ward 1.
And online, it looks like we have 3 people. Jonathan?
Jonathan Chapel Sokol, North Prospect Street in Ward 1, and a member of the steering committee. There's an echo.
Kathy?
Kathy Alwell, Wards 1 and 8, East District School Commissioner, and I live in Ward 1.
And Kathy? Cindy?
Yeah, hi, I'm Cindy. I live on East Avenue and in Ward 1.
And Jack? Hi.
Hey everyone, Jack Hansen, the East District City Councilor. I live on College Street in Ward 8.
All right, welcome to tonight's meeting. We're going to start with Speak Out. So if people have things that they want to bring up, now's a good time. If you're online and you raise your hand, hopefully I'll be able to catch that. Or can they just show a hand, a virtual hand?
Yeah.
And then, so Cindy, you want to start? I can't hear you.
She's on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted. I'd just like to ask that at a future meeting, we talk about transportation on East Avenue, both sidewalks and the road, and DPW's plans for traffic calming. They'd promised they'd get back to us, and it's been quite some time. Would love to hear what DPW is doing, and my guess is there might be other topics should Chapin or somebody from DPW come to another meeting, to a future meeting. That's it.
Was there anyone who that you've been in contact with that we should contact to follow?
Well, I've been going to Chapin because some of the folks that work for him, frankly, are not as responsive as they could be. So, and I understand there's some turnover there. So I would suggest starting with either Chapin or Nicole Loesch.
Okay.
And the higher the food chain we can get, the better, because, yeah, obviously.
Okay.
I have a letter from Ann Brenna that she wanted me to read tonight. Hi, Tom and Keith. I wanted to respond to Emily's comments at the NPA, so thanks for the opportunity. I live right across the street from her. First, I disagree with her that college students are not a huge part of the housing problem, at least in the downtown neighborhoods. The market forces definitely favor converting former single-family homes or duplexes into college student housing. UVM's reported student body numbers are incredibly hard to make sense of, but the numbers seem to keep drifting up. The goal of the city should be to prevent the conversion of entire neighborhoods to student housing, and even to convert some existing student rentals to long-term tenants when possible. This was the whole point of the neighborhood project. UVM needs to be part of that goal. I'm very happy they are building on the Trinity College campus, but I'm less convinced that it wasn't that I was in the beginning, that this is going to have the desired impact. Second is single-family homes. There aren't many left in this neighborhood, but there are people with families who would love to have a single-family home. The city needs more families and children. The city also needs more 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, but both things can be true and can be a goal. I am fully in support of moving ahead with City Place and I'm hoping the former Y will be converted to housing, open to everyone and not just students. Third, when UVM students graduate, they can't afford to live here and they move away. The neighborhoods need more recent college grads who are working and ready to become permanent members of the Burlington community. Hell, maybe even long enough to start families on their own. And
Okay, thanks. Richard, anything? Anything else from people online? Okay, we're going to move forward then to city council updates. I've got three things on the agenda. It's the Trinity project, City Place and Public Safety. And Jack, I think you're the lone counselor representing the city council tonight.
Okay, yeah, I can speak. I don't have a ton on those items. I was just messaging with Brian Pine, the former city councilor and director of the Community and Economic Development Office, which is from the city side, the lead on the City Place project. And he let me know that there's going to be an update coming very soon. And with these updates, you know, it's usually a mix of what they're able to share in public session as well as executive session for council, but we haven't gotten any public or executive session updates in quite a while on City Place, but he's telling me that it's coming very soon. So should have more information on that. But, you know, the last time we did have updates, it was, you know, pretty promising that things were moving forward. Finally. And then in terms of the Trinity, similarly, we haven't had a super recent update on that. I can ask Brian about that as well. And if he gets back to me during the meeting, I can give any updates he has on that front. And something I definitely wanted to let you all know about, it's not in those three categories, but on Monday, we actually changed the criteria for the property tax lag relief program. Not sure if you all remember this, but back in, I believe, October, the council had passed a program to basically give property tax relief, give direct checks, basically give money back to property taxpayers who saw a large who are income sensitized and who saw a large increase in their assessment due to the reappraisal last year. And we actually adjusted the criteria for that. So there's probably some new folks that are now eligible. So if you own property and it's worth less than $550,000 and it increased by more than 40% through the reappraisal, you're eligible. And you have to also be receiving a state property tax credit, meaning your income is low enough to get a state property tax credit. You're eligible to get money from the city to cover the lag in the updated credit. So yeah, hopefully that applies to some folks in you know, who are listening or people you know. I didn't see the breakdown by ward of who this is going to impact, but previously it was 500,000 was the cutoff for the property value, and it had to be a 50% increase. Now it's 550,000, and it only has to be a 40% increase that you experienced due to reappraisal. So it's a bigger group of people now that are eligible for that.
Excuse me, Jack, but my understanding
Yeah.
is the city will be contacting people who they believe are eligible. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, the city will. If for some reason if you feel like you fall into that and you're not getting contacted, definitely let me know. But yes, the plan is for everyone in that category to get something in the mail saying you're eligible for this money. You do have to have been impacted economically by COVID though as well, is the other criteria. So yeah, I have to just step away for just 2 seconds to pull something off the stove, but I'm happy to answer people's questions and talk about, talk about whatever people want to talk about. But I just wanted to give those updates.
Okay, thanks.
I'll be back in 2 seconds. Just going to take something off the stove. Great. Do folks have questions or issues they want to discuss further, Jonathan?
Jack, I wanted to ask, this week, several of us on my street received reassessments of our houses. And I'm kind of curious why that happened. We all got big reassessments last year. Mine was 58%, well, since 2018. And we got another reassessment just this week. And what's that all about?
That's interesting, Keith. Yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. So I'm not sure, but I can definitely email the assessor's office and just ask them what's going on right now around that. It could be
Probably
they.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, Cindy, go ahead.
I was just going to make a joke that we had so much fun last time around. Why don't we do it?
Did you close any permits in the past year, Keith?
I did get a permit of occupancy 2 weeks ago.
I mean, it's possible that if you closed a permit, they went and took a look again, but you should definitely, you got till I think the 19th to appeal it, and you definitely should.
But I don't even know what I have to, what I'm appealing,
Well, it's a new assessment, right? So if you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, then you should ask.
I don't know what they gave me no reasons why it increased. So I guess we got to start somewhere.
I will, if it's helpful, Keith, I'll email the city assessor's office and CC you and just ask them why this is happening. You said it wasn't just you. You said it was a few people, right?
Yeah, it was several people, and
Okay.
they were as surprised as I was. I don't know.
Okay.
So Jack, just for you probably know this, but you would not be the only city councilor who is helping out people who got reappraisals. So I would definitely urge if you can ask the assessor's office.
Okay.
I had another question. It's about just cause eviction and the governor's veto of it. And I've supported just cause eviction all along. I think it's a good thing. But when the governor vetoed it, I started to give some thought to what are the disadvantages? What are the problems? Now, he has his own set of concerns about it that caused it to be vetoed. And then certain legislators had their opinions, which made it not get overridden. But I started thinking about Burlington, and I started thinking about the East District. And what is there and I don't remember all the details of the ordinance, but are there any controls in the just cause eviction? It seems to me that if it's harder for a landlord to evict tenants, landlords may tend to work towards putting transient renters into their homes, like students, because then they're pretty much assured turnover in the course of a couple of years. Is there anything in the ordinance that would disincent that?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think about it. Yeah, I don't think there's a distance. Well, to be clear, there's no ordinance, right? This was we sought this charter change, and if it had been approved, we would have then made ordinances, and
Right. It would be
we could put whatever we want in the ordinance as long as it complies with the charter change. So we would have the ability to put in, different restrictions and such. The charter change lays out some, at a bare minimum, exemptions to the ban on no cause evictions. There's baked in, but we could also do others by ordinance as well, but that's not going to happen because we didn't get the charter change. So yeah, I don't think there was anything baked into the charter change that would specifically address what you're saying, Jonathan. If it had passed, it would be a worthwhile discussion of, how to potentially look at that at the ordinance level, but we don't have the authority. So.
And that's a difficult one to get at anyway, because, how do you question people about their long-term plans? And, it's an interesting point, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Jack, I wanted to ask a question about the property tax relief. Just for perspective and round numbers, how many properties do you think are going to be impacted by that?
Yeah, I wish I had the exact number right at my fingertips. I think it was in the range of maybe between 300 and 400 additional properties that we're now bringing in to the program. And the reason we did this is because the first round of relief, we allocated, I think it was $1 million towards this program when we opened it in October, and many of the people that were eligible didn't, or that were potentially eligible, because again, we don't know who was impacted by the pandemic or not. That's the one variable where we can't pull data on that. But either way, like, it didn't get, a lot of the people that we thought were maybe eligible didn't apply for it, didn't receive the relief. And so we have a lot of money left over. So we decided to actually expand it. We are going to reach back out to all of the initial people that were in the first pool, as well as this extra group, which I think is like in the 300s. It was mostly the lowering of 40% increase to 50% increase down to a 40% increase. That was where the bulk of the new properties became eligible. Raising the property value up to 550,000 only added less than 100 new properties. I forget the exact number.
Okay, but you're talking about hundreds of properties, not a few thousand.
I think it was in the 300, between 300 and 400 that are now eligible, and the max anyone could get is $2,000. Okay. It's really, this is a one-time program to supplement the fact that the state property tax credit, there's a lag where you wouldn't get the full credit until a year later that you were entitled. And so this is really meant to fill in that gap and make sure that you're not getting hit for 1 year with this much higher amount than you normally would.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Richard?
Jack, thanks for explaining that. I'm pretty sure that we would qualify for tax year 2022, but not for 2021. How does one go about that? Because my wife retired and we lost her income, so that makes quite a difference.
So yeah, we might want to talk offline about that and figure out if you're eligible based on current income versus, because I think the program is based on what you most recently received as a property tax credit rather than current income. So send me an email and I can see if you would be eligible, because that's a unique situation.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And being affected by COVID is a bit subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, we didn't get super specific in the council resolution, so I think it is somewhat at the discretion of, I think it's the CAO's office, whoever on the administration is implementing the program. I think it's pretty discretionary. If someone basically says, here's how I was impacted by COVID, and it passes the straight face test. I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how they determine whether or not that's true or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Any other
I don't think it's a super high bar. In order to show the city that you were in fact impacted, I don't think you have to like provide a bunch of documentation to show that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thanks.
Are there other questions for Jack? Seeing none. Jack, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
We're going to move to the school board commissioners update.
Great. And I'm still here. If my camera's off, it's because I'm getting food and stuff, but I'm listening to everything. So just want people to know that. Even if my camera's off, I'm always listening. So
Smell it.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay, so S-287 passed in both the Senate and the House and is sitting on the governor's desk waiting to be signed into law. So I personally, and I know the whole school board wants to thank everyone, all of you that wrote letters, that telephoned, that talked to your legislators. And I also want to thank the city council for having written a letter of support for this. It really was, and they admitted it was people all across the state coming out in support of this thing. So it's wonderful. It's been passed with all the weights intact. There are a few things on it that we'll have to see. They want the state to hire 4 people in the Department of Ed to oversee parts of it, and they want studies done on parts of it. But the way it looks right now, it will be in 2024. It will be enacted, so that we will start seeing those the difference in tax, what we pay in taxes and how much our taxes will produce for education in this city. And the other thing I was asked to, does anyone have questions on that?
Just one quick question.
Mhm.
And Cindy, why don't you go first?
I just was hoping, Kathy, that you could explain briefly what the act is. I'm not sure that everybody that's watching will know what the act involves.
Well, it is the weighting study, and that is that students, up until now, students have always been weighted in education. So we know that it costs more to educate a child in poverty, a child who English is not their first language, costs more to educate a high school or a middle school kid than it does a grade school kid. And in order to equal out the funding for education, children are counted as one child if they happen to be learning English as a second language. They get, I don't remember in the weights, there's a certain, they get counted then as 2.5 children. And if they're living in poverty, they get counted for 2, I think it is 2.3. I don't know the exact weights on them, but there are different weights put on them. These weights were not correct. When Act 60 was enacted in 90, oh, I don't remember, 98, something like that, in the 90s, late 90s. They didn't have the correct weights. They didn't do any scientific study on those weights. They just kind of put weights to the kids. What somebody thought was how much more it would cost to educate that child. But in the meantime, I mean, there are studies that have been done. And so there was a big study that the legislature had paid for, which was UVM, Rutgers University, and the American Institute of Education did this huge study on the weights and what was the most equitable weights put on educational differences across the country, and look then at Vermont. And Act 60 and 68, how we fund education. So on the taxes coming in for education, we have one of the most equitable laws in the country. But in how we then divvy that money up amongst our school districts, we were kind of way off the mark. And this S287 will now make that all far more equitable. But believe me, it's not all over, but this is a huge step in the right direction for Burlington and for Winooski. And oh, and I didn't say also for children living in rural, sparsely populated areas, that was another weight that people were weighted for.
Great, thanks, Kathy.
Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question. You said that the House and Senate passed it. Now, is the governor expected to sign it?
Well, someone told me they heard today or yesterday on the radio that he's planning to sign it. He just hasn't signed it yet. I mean, as long as he doesn't veto it, we're okay. If he doesn't sign it, it still goes into law when the legislature closes on Friday. But it would be nice to know that he supports education and the equity of education. So let's hope he signs it. He told someone evidently that yes, he was planning to sign it. He just didn't say when. So, and anybody else have any questions on that? No. Okay, and then the next thing I was asked to talk about was the high school. Which one of the concepts was the one that we voted on in the school board? And this is a large picture of it. And I don't know if it was C. And if I hold it up, tell me if you can see that. It will face directly onto Institute Road with what I'm seeing on the right is going to be towards North Avenue. And pretty much this is the only thing we were voting on. It is of the 5 that we were given to choose from, it was the most economic. I'm not going to say the cheapest because none of these are exactly what probably anybody would call cheap, but it had everything pretty much that we could want. Now, the whole inside of this building and everything about heating, because they are looking into geothermal to do that if it's possible on that site. If there is geothermal, that has been planned to be put into there as well. But the siting of it, all 5 buildings were pretty much the same size. It's just because that's the size we're going to need. And this one was, C was 100 and 181.3 million is what, and we literally had to just get this done in order to start, for them to start doing really the plans inside with everything that entails. And then we will have more of an idea of what it is truly going to cost and what is the price tag we're going to put out to the voters. And that has to be finished by the end of August to be on the November ballot. So that's kind of the push. There will be other input gathering meetings for the community. There'll be other questionnaires that will go out. I assume many of you saw the questionnaire that went with this, because we got the feedback from what everybody in the city had answered to kind of make that decision. We got kind of the gist of what people were willing to pay for. And I will say we just had a meeting last night, and we are now starting to go out and look for other funds. So i.e. Tom, I will get a hold of you, but it was just last night, okay?
Good. I think there's a new owner of Twitter who has pretty deep pockets.
Oh, wonderful. So is there any more questions? Anybody, is there something I missed that you want to know?
I've got a question, a school question, but it's not about the high school.
Oh, okay. If I can answer it, sure. Go ahead.
There was, I guess during, well, the beginning and middle of the COVID, there was federal funds to support school lunches.
Yes.
And now what I've heard is that people who have family income of less than $30,000 or more than, there's a $30,000 family income cutoff. And if you make more than that, then you don't qualify for a free lunch. Is that true? And
I don't know if it's that. I'm not sure what the federal poverty guidelines are, exactly, but that's how it used to be. But Burlington, and this is still the question out there, for the last, many years before, so 5 years before COVID ever started, we had such high free and reduced lunch counts at most of our schools that the whole district got free and reduced lunch. There was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a snack free to all children in Burlington. That may change now with this. I don't know enough about what is going on now. I know there was a bill in the House and Senate asking to use monies from the recovery for 1 year to continue that free and reduced lunch program for all schools. But a lot of that depends truly on how economically well off a district is, whether everybody in it is free and reduced or not. And I just know we were but even if that continues, I don't know if there's changes that are going to come. I don't know what you heard, Tom. But
all I heard was that Hunger Free Vermont wasn't advocating using some of the
right.
Surplus funds to do a study of 1 year to see what the effect of having a free and reduced lunch continue. And it just seemed unreasonable in that, hey, if we think we've already done this, so we know that it has an impact. And so if we want to continue, let's just do it. But to just say we're going to study it more seemed disingenuous.
Oh, Okay. Well,
I think we should do
I-
it. Don't get me wrong. I just think that we should just say we're gonna pay for it.
Right, but the money that's there is only for 1 year. There's only enough in the COVID money to do this across the state for 1 year.
Yeah.
So, and which would be fine to do it, but I don't even know whether that passed or not. I know there was a lot of talk, but I don't think they have decided all the excess funding in the state education fund, where they're going to spend it yet. So,
Okay. Do we have other questions on education? Keith?
No.
If I could just,
I have a question. Kathy, when I looked at the picture that you showed in the paper, it seemed to have up in the upper left-hand corner, administration building.
yes,
Was
it
that
does.
the new school district administration building?
It
Are
is,
we planning?
no,
Kathy?
yes, it is proposed there, and the site could be used, but that it came to so much more money that the superintendent said no, that we would put in for another time. So no, it's not being built when the high school's being built.
And any other questions? Jack, were you gonna say something?
yeah, I had my virtual hand raised. I just wanted to say, well, first of all, great news about the geothermal, Kathy. I'm glad to hear that you all are looking at that for the new high school. But mostly I just wanted to say about the weighting at the, the state level change, that's huge. I just really want to thank you, Kathy. You've been such a strong advocate on this for so long, and it's a really big deal. It's really important for everyone in Burlington and all these other communities that have been getting shortchanged. So just wanted to thank you. I'm a little hesitant to celebrate early, and I don't know what's going to happen, but this is pretty monumental. So thanks for sharing it, and just thanks for all your work on it.
Oh, thanks. But also thank you. I don't know if you heard because you were off, but please give our thanks to the city council, because it meant a lot having the city council backing us on this as well.
I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, it was easy. I mean, it was easy for us to do that, but I think you've done a lot of legwork. So super meaningful, and yeah, really glad to hear that's finally happening.
Yeah, I am too. Thanks.
All right, if there's no other questions, Kathy, thank you very much. We're gonna move ahead to the Community Development Block Grant update. Is Cindy
Okay.
still on?
Ooh,
Yeah, I'm on. Hi,
Oh,
hi. So is Hannah on? I don't believe she is.
don't think Hannah.
My intent tonight was to describe what the community development block grants are, because I think that the term gets thrown around a lot and I don't know if people understand it. So I just wanted to quickly go over what that is. And that is, it's a program, it's a federal program administered by HUD, and HUD makes grants to communities like Burlington, and then Burlington has the opportunity to use that money to assist low and moderate income households with at a number of different points. And that includes affordable housing, economic opportunities, and addressing barriers there too, and suitable living environment. And that includes things like providing assistance to victims of domestic violence, that kind of thing. So Burlington gets this chunk of money. There's an advisory committee that Hannah and I both sat on that works with CEDO, the Community Economic Development Office, to allocate the amount of money that we have. And we were quite lucky this year in that the amount of applications or the dollar value of the applications that came in was moderately close to what we had. So most of the entities that put in for funding received close to, if not all, of what they had applied for. And there are a number of them, and my memory is not that good. So if you're interested in which organizations we've recommended receive how much money, I'd encourage you to go to the city website, because it would take quite a bit of time, and I probably wouldn't get it quite right of who got how much. But generally speaking, most of the applicants received close to what they'd asked for. So, and a lot of great applications, and a lot of good work going on out there. So that was a broad overview. I was hoping that Hannah would fill in some of the details, but unfortunately she's not here. So any questions or
Well, Hannah might come in at 10:20, at 7:20.
Just a comment, Adam may be here, we're running ahead of schedule.
okay. Yeah, so
It's about 7:11 now, and this item wasn't really scheduled until 7:20, so maybe Hannah will show up.
I couldn't quite understand that, Tom, but may I suggest that if Hannah has information about details that she wants to, about particular projects that she wants to add, that if she comes in at 7:20, then we'd give her the opportunity to do that.
Sure.
Yeah. And in the meantime, do people have particular questions or?
I don't think in this room, anyone online. I don't see any hands up, so no questions.
Great, well, thanks.
Well, we're in a sort of a unusual
Position.
because we're usually struggling to make up a few minutes and to keep ourselves on track, but it turns out that it's here at 7:12, and our next item, which is the main item tonight, is the housing panel. And Megan's here. Megan just got here.
Megan's gonna be here, and there's
Brian. And there's Brian.
Brian on time. Come on. Wow.
I was just saying, I'm not sure if you heard it, that we are running a little bit ahead of schedule. So your signing in at this time was very, very good timing.
Propitious.
We planned it that way.
All right, and Ethan, you're gonna leave this?
Yeah. What I'd like to do is, like you experienced previously, is put forward a set of questions, and then the audience can ask their questions afterwards, and sort of generate a discussion. We got I received quite a few responses by email that they really like that. They give them a chance to take the questions, and take thoughtful ideas about housing. The reason that we're focusing on housing market is actually that because our city councilors told us earlier on in the year, this was a major topic that most of our constituents in Ward 8 and Ward 1 talked about them. So it seemed like the appropriate thing for NPA to do would be to focus on the housing situation in the East District. And this is a kind of a momentous month for those of us who live in the student rental area, because we're going to be saying goodbye to a lot of our neighbors, and we're going to be welcoming a whole new set of neighbors after June 1. So it's a big time. Our students are getting ready for exams, and then they'll be leaving sometime between now and the end of the month. And we'll be welcoming new people on our streets sometime in the early month of June. So it's time to talk about housing and housing situation in the East District. I'll just go through the questions and I'll try to make no comments. Obviously, you know my perspective, but I'll let you answer the question as thoroughly as you want. If you want to go back, that's fine. Want me to clarify? I'm sure that people in the audience will clarify, ask clarifying questions after we have finished. Okay. Are there current proposals before the planning commission beside Indiana Trinity campus housing proposal for housing development projects in the East District?
Yeah, so I can take this first one. Brian and I will kind of trade off as applicable, but at this time, the only proposal that the Planning Commission has heard about is the University of Vermont's proposal to re-envision the Trinity campus. And so that is one of the major items that's on the Planning Commission's work plan for the coming months. In both the presentation from at the City Council and the Planning Commission, Richard Kate from the university delivered the kind of context for what the university is thinking about for Trinity campus, as well as some specific requests for us to revisit the zoning. So at this time, that's our main focus at the Planning Commission level.
And I would just add, I think, Keith, is that the Planning Commission, really handles land use and policy. They don't review specific development proposals. Right. And so it was kind of like a question that had both, what are you looking at for land use and policy maybe? And also what developments do we know about? Right. And student specific, so the DRB reviews specific projects, whereas the commission is the entity, of course, that looks at policy and implementing or putting policy into effect for the land use goals of the city. But the university has mentioned in conversation, I believe it was mentioned in public session when last time we had a presentation, and Lisa's here, she can certainly correct me if this isn't correct, but that this is the beginning of what the university is envisioning as far as expanding the supply of student housing. That Trinity is the focus now, but that is something the university has indicated is that there are areas near Waterman and DeGosbrian that may in fact be not too far down the road for repurposing, and it would require some rezoning as well. There's a lot of surface parking there. I don't know how many acres, but there's quite a bit of surface parking lot between those properties. And I don't think the hospital is going to hold on to Gosbrian as a use forever. So there's some opportunity there as well.
Thank you, Brian. Does CETO and planning plan to improve the balance of long-term residents and transitory students in the core section of our city between Prospect and Winooski Streets and Maple and North Streets, where there is a preponderance of student rentals?
Megan, why don't you give a first shot at
go
that?
First?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think that as you mentioned at the beginning, Keith, housing is a big focus of the cities right now, whether that is within our departments or the Planning Commission and many others in the city. And a big part of that work is trying to identify places in the city where we can make our zoning policies, our land use policies that Brian was talking about, make it easier for us to create new homes. And that's really to help us create new homes of all types. So one of the things I think within that kind of framework that will have the biggest impact on the area of the city that you all live in and those specific kind of streets that you mentioned, Keith, is really this Trinity campus zoning amendment and trying to help work with the institution to identify how that zoning could be more permissive of them building a large number of student beds on the Trinity campus. And like Brian said too, after Trinity, we're certainly open to talking with the institutions about other on-campus sites and areas of the campus if we need to consider other zoning amendments to help enable the reuse of parts of campus to accommodate more beds. We're certainly happy to be a partner in that conversation as well. But yeah, definitely from the perspective of how do we address the housing challenges and the housing availability challenges for both, long-term residents and student residents who might be here. A big part of it is helping identify more places for people to live. So that's a big focus of our work.
And I would just add that the work that the community did, the city planning, CETO, community residents, many of folks in this meeting were involved around the Burlington Neighborhood Project, is something that contained a number of goals and objectives that were aimed exactly at what you're referring to, Keith, in this question. Creating more balance is something that, is, I think, a pretty widely held, there's a consensus that we need to constantly strive for, ensuring that we have, more heterogeneous neighborhoods and not have, very significant out of balance in terms of, honestly, students living off campus. I think is just, to be, not to target or to sort of blame students for all the problems, but in some neighborhoods, there are, real quality of life challenges because it's just a preponderance of students living in neighborhoods. And so I think we all know, we've all seen it. We've all have friends. Some people in these wards, in your wards, live right among significant numbers of students. And it just presents real challenges that were identified in that neighborhood project, and some strategies that were included, the specific strategies that I think we lost some progress on, lost some ground on during the pandemic, were specifically around the idea of an employer-assisted model for housing, so that the big employers, the university and the hospital, the biggest ones, would find develop a program that would really incentivize their own staff to be able to live, in the neighborhoods adjacent to their institutions, bringing a whole bunch of benefits to that. And also there was an idea to target the acquisition of some key properties. Money is always the greatest hurdle, but it's not impossible. We just have to kind of redouble and refocus. And I think we lost some of that focus over the last few years during the pandemic. And this is something I've always believed we as a city need to be more deliberate about.
Brian, I'm going to stop the question right there. Since you brought up the neighborhood project, did you want to say anything more about that than you've already said?
Only that, some of the goals of that project are either underway or several of them have been accomplished, but much of the stuff that we're talking about right now, very specifically around rebalancing the, sort of occupants of housing in the near university neighborhoods, we really didn't make any real noticeable progress on that. And I'll be honest and frank about that. And I'm disappointed in that.
Well, and I will just add to that, Keith, too, that really coming back to what I had mentioned about thinking about places within the city that we could help facilitate the creation of new housing, like on campus. I think that was also part of the goals of the neighborhood project. So in that sense, we are continuing to move forward on the policy side of things, even while some of the other kind of programs and specific strategies that were in the plan have fallen behind. So.
Thank you. With UVM having received a record 30,000 applicants for entrance to the university this fall, with the probability of a larger freshman class, and let's also acknowledge they're expanding their graduate student programs. What plans does the city have to assist the long-term residents in the university area to revitalize their so-called neighborhoods?
I would, I haven't talked to anyone this week or lately from UVM about sort of the Actually, I talked to Joe Spidell a couple weeks ago about enrollment and whether the applicant pool, while it got much larger, does that automatically correlate to an increased first year student body, or if the incoming class is going to be roughly the same. And Joe said that the university is not looking at to increase the size of the incoming class, despite the fact that the application pool got quite a bit larger. That, I think, is driven by a few factors. One is SAT tests were made optional last year. maybe during the 21 year. And so that has started to have an impact in terms of how many applications come in. And I believe they're seeing applications from parts of the country. They lost a significant chunk of the international applicants, but parts of the country that never had many applicants are starting to show up in the application pool. And, that's changing a little bit UVM's mix, but their standards for admission are still considered pretty high. And so maybe Lisa can help us with what's UVM looking at in terms of growth in actual enrollment, even though, because of the class, the applicant pool got so much larger. But again, that could be not a good correlation to enrollment.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa. Would you like to talk
Hi.
about? Hi.
How are you? Thanks, Brian. No, I think you had it correct. It's we did have a record number of applicants this year. We'll always hear people say enrollment is a little bit art and a little bit science. So we admit a certain amount of students and we hope that we got the right number that's going to come. But I'd say essentially we're expecting about the same number in the fall as we had this past fall. So not looking to grow a lot there.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Keith, go ahead.
Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, I was just going to say that, a big part of our work so far on thinking about the Trinity campus zoning is just trying to be more collaborative with UVM to understand how their enrollment and housing trends are changing on campus. I know they've been doing a lot of work, and I think that they've talked to you at these NPA meetings about some of the work they've been doing around understanding what their students are looking for in terms of housing, as well as I'm personally trying to better understand some of the factors that are influencing that demand for both applications and then how that will ultimately impact the university's enrollment trends. Looking historically, and I think even as recently as this year, we have seen that there have been changes year over year, sometimes decreasing, sometimes increasing. And we've really been trying to stay more up to date on what the factors are that influence those changes and how much of them are kind of indicators of a longer term trend that would suggest that their enrollment would be either increasing or decreasing. So that's one thing we're trying to be more collaborative with them about. And then, I feel like I keep saying this, but I do think it's really important that, ultimately from our perspective, or from my perspective, I should say, really working with them to try to identify ways that the university can start to implement, multi-year plans for building housing on campus or, kind of campus supportive housing near the institutions. And I see this as being a really important thing for us to make sure that we have the foundation in place from a land use policy and a zoning perspective, particularly if there was to be a situation where the institutions experienced a sustained period of growth and needed and wanted to build more housing on campus, to make sure they could do that. So again, just trying to be more collaborative about understanding those trends, but also making sure that the policies are supportive and really help facilitate creating more housing on campus.
Yeah, and we really appreciate those collaborations.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say that we are seeing more California cars on our street than we've ever seen before. The house next door has 3 students from California and another student from Montana. So you reached wide for this year's class. And so, but the issue is not students. I just want to be clear. This issue for most of us and that are homeowners is that we feel that the priority for rental units should be for people who are out of the student phase of their life and in starting a career, family, et cetera, in order for the prosperity of Burlington to grow. It's not an anti-student thing. We have great relationships with our students, but I just want it to be clear that we're talking about what's the priority for the limited housing in this university area. Is it all for students, or can it be for we have a new family that moved onto our street, and right off they had a new baby. So it changes the whole atmosphere on our street. And those are the kind of people we'd like to see, have it, some of the living units within, I'm just specifically talking to Ward 8 because that's what I know about the best right now. What I want to go on, I've been around a long time and I ran for alderman in '85 and I talked about these same things. So it's not something that I haven't talked about for a long time. Mayor Sanders' administration tried to solve some of the city-university relationship issues by sending the university and medical center a tax bill to alleviate the financial impact of their presence in our city. The doctors still talk about how they hate Sanders. Now, institutions objected to the request, but later negotiated a settlement so that they pay in lieu of tax amount. UVM's housing policy has a significant impact on the East District's housing. What steps can the city's administration now take to create an improved balance of students and residents in the student rental area? I think you've already mentioned some of the things.
Yeah, Keith, well, maybe Brian remembers that. I certainly wasn't here when that happened, but
I was going to add.
I would like to have seen the reaction, but
I was going to add that Keith ran in 1985, and perhaps this individual at this end of this call maybe was very much part of his campaign, and we didn't pull it off, but we came close, and Keith has stuck with it ever since. So he gets an award for 37 years of dogged commitment, even when he hasn't won all the time, right?
That's right. You don't have to win to get your point.
That's right.
yeah.
So-
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, specifically thinking about the point that you were just making, Keith, too, about when you're talking about balance, you're talking about how do we make sure the housing near campus is also attractive and available to young families or working professionals, older adults, whomever it might be. I think one of the things that we have talked about, especially in thinking about the Trinity campus and how the institutions could facilitate more housing there, is thinking about how, at least from the policy side, how we make sure that they can develop that in a way that has lots of amenities and is a type of housing that could be attractive to more of their students, maybe some upperclassmen, maybe graduate students, really to help so that there's a more attractive option that those individuals might be interested in moving to help alleviate some of the pressure on nearby neighborhoods, especially thinking about areas of the campus that are easily accessible and kind of desirable areas of the campus to live. So, that's a big thing that we've been talking about is, could any kind of development on Trinity campus also have a small cafe or, something like that would really make it be kind of a rich neighborhood that would help attract some of the students into the campus area. And then beyond that, I think, again, Brian had mentioned some of the goals that the neighborhood project has that are really trying to look at ways to help facilitate other people having access to housing, and especially addressing some of the affordability aspects of that housing. And I think, similarly, some of the work that we're doing to try to create more housing options of all kinds throughout the city will kind of help expand as well the available housing that people have to choose from. So I think kind of together, those things really helping provide more options will start to have an impact where other programs can help too. I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think you covered it well, Megan. The goal, of course, is one that I think we all agree on. It's really just a question of what are the strategies? How are we going to get there? And I honestly think we need more like the conversation, more dialogue, and more focus on this to get us out of just the sort of broad sort of sweeping goals portion. And we're doing it. I mean, the Trinity rezoning is a great example of, putting goals into action. A rezoning of the area where Waterman parking lot and DeGosbrian is would be a significant positive trend. But we have other initiatives that were embedded in that neighborhood project that I think really deserve more focus and attention. So that's where I would steer.
We receive a significant amount of in lieu of tax money. Councilor Shannon gave me the figure a couple of years ago of 12 million. I don't know what it is now or if that was true then. I didn't, she just said that number. And I just wanted, I don't know what the most recent amount is, or if that was even near the number. But what is that money? Is that money go towards the general revenue of the city, or is it helping out neighborhoods that are totally impacted by the UVM's housing policy?
Sure. The amount I would add is I don't think UVM's portion is anywhere near 12 million. That might have been the total payments in lieu of taxes that the city gets.
Right, at some point in time, maybe, but
Yeah.
we did actually, Keith, in response to this question, we did look at the current fiscal year budget, and we know that UVM was budgeted to pay about $1.4 million in fees for service to the city just this year. And I think that helps to support our public safety departments, police and fire, and also includes what we call an omnibus payment, which just goes to the general fund to help support different city services. And I think, over the course of a year, the institutions, all of them may encounter other types of fees if they own any property that is still taxable and is not tax exempt, they would pay taxes on them, and permitting fees and other types of fees that anyone would pay in the city. I believe they still pay.
We haven't directed the dollars, and there was one more fee that many people don't notice, but on your bill, your utility bill is a very nominal amount each month called the franchise fee, and the franchise fee is actually a pretty clear policy directive from the decision makers in Burlington, which said essentially the utilities, you're going to pay a nominal fee, 2 or 3%, is going to go charged to you as utilities, public and private, for the right to run your utilities across the public right of way. You're using the public right of way to conduct your business. And while it sounds like just another tax that gets passed on to average people, in fact, the university and the hospital that don't pay property taxes pay very significant franchise fees. Like, we're talking significant numbers are paid in the franchise fee. So for every dollar raised with a franchise fee, the nonprofit tax exempt institutions pay about 35 cents of every dollar the city collects comes from entities that otherwise wouldn't be paying taxes. So that's an example of, sort of creativity around raising revenue away from the property tax. And it is a really innovative way to ensure that the institutions can also contribute to the cost of city government. But none of these funds are directed at your question, Keith, which is, right, are these used specifically to mitigate direct impacts in the near university, near campus neighborhoods? And the answer is they are not.
The only exception that I'll say to that is, and I know you're all very aware of this, in previous years, at times, the institutions would help fund increased foot patrols with the BPD. And so that was something that they were paying for and was specifically to be supportive of the neighborhoods that you all live in. So.
Thank you. A development plan submitted to the city by a company like Higher Ground receives rigorous scrutiny with numerous requests for impact studies on its neighbors, including noise and traffic. Shouldn't UVM be held to the same standard when its enrollment overflows into the housing on the surrounding streets of the university?
I think this is a great question, Keith. And ultimately, I think the most direct answer is really an unsatisfying one, but I do have some other things to add to it. So, first and foremost, the zoning ordinance doesn't specify that a certain amount of the institution's enrollment has to live on the campus. So we don't really have a standard as part of the development review process that we could use to say, you're meeting or not meeting this standard. But I will just say, most of the institution's projects are of a big enough scale that they are required to go in front of the city's development review board, sometimes even through the state permitting process, Act 250, which I'm sure you're very aware of. So those are forums for us to have a closer inspection about some of the impacts, not necessarily on enrollment, but on some of the impacts of these campus development projects. One other thing, I'm not sure how many folks are aware of, but we do also require through the zoning ordinance that the institutions, all of the Hill institutions actually, prepare a parking management plan at least every 5 years. And this includes an analysis of where people live and work on the 3 institutions' campuses and in our community, any projected changes in enrollment or the number of beds or the number of employees, all for the purpose of helping to analyze their parking demand and their potential strategies that they'll use to address their parking demand, but also helps us give a bigger perspective on kind of across the entire system, all of the campuses and the entire campus area. What are really the things that are happening and what are the things that they anticipate to happen on the campus in the next several years. So it is a kind of a rigorous process for them to share some of their planning initiatives and help us better understand what their balance is looking like in the future.
And I just want to note that is a joint institutional parking management plan. Do I have that
Yes.
close?
Yep.
Close. There's no reason why that couldn't include a discussion of enrollment in housing. I mean, it doesn't have it now, but it probably could be a useful thing to do on a periodic basis for both universities.
It does talk about any anticipated changes in enrollment in the next, whatever period of time they're preparing it for, as well as any potential changes in the numbers of beds on campus, because those all, impact their parking demand at the end of the day.
The next question you may have answered it. If you feel like you have nothing else to say about it, that's fine. We'll go on. Should the Planning Commission and CEDO recommend to the administration that the city require UVM to present a multi-year plan to build more living units on campus and in the East District to decrease the demand for housing by students on surrounding neighborhood streets?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add besides what I just described about the parking management plan process. So.
Okay. I think I think you covered everything that my questions asked. So I'll leave it to the facilitator now to ask if anybody else has any questions.
Sounds good.
Richard, questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, Megan and Brian, thank you very much. It's quite interesting. I'm kind of a great believer in leverage, which we don't seem to do very much of. And I'm interested to know to the extent to which the city works with developers to propel a development to fruition. And I'll give you an example. There's a development that's been before the DRB and the Planning Commission for about 7 or 8 years. It's arguable what the unit number is at the moment, and that it's going to go to an Act 250 hearing, or a second Act 250 hearing, I should say, later on this year. And it's close to the Trinity campus, and the developer is a total prick and won't moderate the number of units he wants to put in a very, very precarious geographical location, which hangs over the ravine above Riverwatch, if you can imagine that. To what extent can, and you could look at any development that's possible from a city place down, to what extent is the city working with developers to really move things along, to grease the wheels of any project? The one that I talked about when I started, I don't know how many beds it could be, but the neighbors are fighting it vigorously, and so are some geological experts. But a more modest development may facilitate 100 beds, I don't know. But if you multiply that by the number of wards we have, I bet there are developments like that all around the city that are just in a sort of frozen zone. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I've got a couple of other things, but that is something that I think the city can be proactive on.
The answer is, from our department anyway, is I would say there are times when developments are proposed that require land use changes, zoning changes, and in exchange, there's often like a sort of a trade-off, if you will, perhaps an increase in the percentage of the inclusionary units, the affordable units, or maybe the dedication of some land to set aside for public access or public benefit. And I think of Cambrian Rise. I think of the, certainly the initial intentions around City Place. And those are some examples that the city plays a more involved role in. But Richard, like there's examples of others like over on Grove Street, which turns into Patchen Road, the old SD Ireland. Not a lot of city involvement per se, really just sort of the regulatory regimen of getting through the permitting process, and the inclusionary affordable requirements are something that our office handles. But it varies quite a bit. I'd say I don't know who's actually the developer on Fletcher Place anymore, if it's still the original or if it's been handed off to a different developer. I'm not even aware of who that developer is right now. If it's
Is it still Frank von Turkovich?
Yeah, probably. He keeps on changing the company that's the vehicle for it, but it's him.
Yeah, I don't know that our office has had any role whatsoever except to review for the purposes of compliance with the inclusionary housing portion of the zoning ordinance, and that's our requirement to do that, and we have to ensure that. But beyond that, there's no other involvement in that project.
But should you?
I'm not sure. Are you asking my opinion? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking. We keep on hearing about housing shortage and that sort of thing. So what is the city really doing at a grassroots level with developer by developer, project by project, to move them along?
Yeah, we have, I think Megan can speak about some changes to the process, like form-based code and initiatives like that. I think primarily the city is best at ensuring that our policies and procedures really work to facilitate the kind of development that we need and want as a community. I don't see us having the capacity or bandwidth to do like a developer ombudsman, so to speak, which would help walk people through. That has been discussed in the past, and I know some communities do that. It hasn't gotten a lot of political support. The idea has not been supported in Burlington as a way to use city funds to get developers through the process. So I'd like to hear what Megan thinks about it, though.
Yeah, no, I also think this is a really good question, Richard. And like I said to one of Keith's questions, kind of an unsatisfying answer that, the city doesn't typically intervene in those types of projects unless it's something that, like Brian said, we have some sort of a development agreement to help facilitate other community benefits, but we certainly don't do that for every development project citywide. I hear you about, projects getting stuck installed. And from my perspective, a big part of what the Planning Commission has been working on for my entire tenure is trying to identify areas of our ordinances that often get people stuck installed. Obviously, we can't address every one of those issues because sometimes they might be financial or outside agencies that create some of those barriers. But as Brian mentioned, we are trying to at least create as few opportunities for that stalling to happen from a policy perspective before a project even gets, designed.
Meanwhile, nothing's getting built and people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars every year. The developer, Montpelier, every interested party, and the residents who Frank von Turkovich came to an NPA admitting that his development would trash the property values. That's the exact words he used. So, it seems a silly old circle with no sign of of an amicable resolution unless someone takes the bull by the horns and says, right, we're either going to put in a 50-unit project, which would be, I don't know whether that would be acceptable to the neighbors, but something of modest scale, but actually get built. Anyway, I've made the point, I think, but it's frustrating as an interested spectator.
Jonathan, you've got your hand up?
Thanks, Tom. First, Brian and Megan, I really appreciate your coming to the meeting and joining this conversation. Obviously, you know, this is really important to people in the East District. Let me start with a very short, I hope a short rant, and then get to my question. I'm wondering, I like and appreciate the Trinity Campus project, but I'm not sure that I like the language that's used about it. I would like people to think about new projects, whether it's Trinity or Von Turkovich's or whatever, in terms of the metrics. And the metrics should be, what is it going to do to the vacancy rate in the city? What is it going to do to rental rates in the city? What is it going to do to affordability for apartments in the city? Because that's the crux of it. Number of beds on a university campus is a fine number, but it doesn't say anything about what it does to the city. And I think our greatest concern, in administration, residents in the community, are how can we make our city better? So that's my rant. The question is back on the neighborhood project. And I think the study was fantastic. And I think I remember, Brian, the CDNR meeting where you handed the neighborhood project from the city council to your current position. When can we expect to see work done on phases 2 and 3, the slowing down of conversions to rentals and actually bringing some of that property back? And I understand they're kind of big deals, but I think we all understand that COVID was crazy and there were a lot of distractions, but we're getting past that now. When do you think we can start to really talk about figuring out some of those plans that are in the neighborhood project?
Jonathan, I wish I had prepared better for this one because I don't have much of an answer other than to say we are currently very focused on the homelessness efforts that we have underway, and that's extremely consuming of our limited staff. But we have we're not ever going to lose track and lose sight of the fact that those recommendations contained in that report are something that, there's a lot in there. We spent a lot of time on it. The community spent a lot of time on it. It was an investment, and it's not forgotten. I'd hate to make a promise that I can't keep as far as when we're going to get back to it, but the urging is not lost on me. The fact that we have not returned to it in the year that I've been back at CEDO is something I'm not actually I'm not proud of that fact. I would say, again, I try not to overpromise, underdeliver. So my commitment is as simple as not, bringing it back for consideration, for exploration, for further, development of some of these concepts, because a lot of those are ideas that have been tried elsewhere, and they're fairly, I think they're proven concepts. So I think we just need, we got to get the political will going, and that's something that your support as citizens is important in that process.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that there are parts of this that the city could help advance, especially through exploratory phases. And then ultimately, as Brian mentioned, a lot of those phase 2 and phase 3 goals are going to be very cost intensive. And so I think to the extent that there is an interest in exploring how to fund those, I think that'll be a really important piece of how successful we are at moving them forward. Jonathan, if I could also just speak to your rant, because I appreciated it. I wanted to share, it doesn't look like you have the chat on, but I can share it with Keith and Tom, that the city just a few weeks ago launched the first kind of iteration of a housing dashboard that my office is creating. it'll be built out more over the coming months, but the purpose of it is to try to better keep an eye on those metrics that you mentioned about, how are we helping, or how are we progressing towards our goals of not only having more housing, but of affecting vacancy rate and affordability and all of those things. So we've put together a few key pieces of the dashboard that look at homeowners and renters, overall housing unit changes in the city, and some information about the condition of housing. And so I'll happily share a link with your facilitators to circulate in your minutes as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
And I would just add to what Jonathan mentioned, you hit it right on, because there had been a 20-year period where there were no new student beds added from 73 to 93, and in 93, Redstone apartments opened up, just, that south portion between traditional Redstone campus and the country club, and rental rates leveled off for 2 years and vacancies went up. And, as a result, simple supply and demand law of economics, conditions improved, and like a number of important policy objectives were achieved. So that's really an important point to include, is we need to be able to measure and point to that, because that's really, you're right, that is the goal.
Anything else, Jonathan?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
I've actually got it's sort of a question, but sort of a comment, and that's, here in wards 1 and 8, what you hear from us is the big facility, in our wards, and that's UVM and the hospital, and that they're bringing more students in who need housing, but the hospital is also bringing in more employees. And from an employee point of view, it's not just the hospital. I mean, we've seen things in other parts of Burlington where dealer.coms come in, and these are good jobs. I mean, it's not like we don't want this type of job in Burlington, but there's that, and Hulu, and a little bit outside of town, there's now Beta, which is going to grow into hundreds of employees. And how do we react to employers bringing in more, increasing demand for housing? We're pretty welcoming to say these are good jobs, and those three places, I think, are bringing in pretty clean jobs, well-paying jobs, stuff that we want to see. But how do we balance that with the demand that's going to put, at least in Burlington, but probably the whole county, for housing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. And I think in part, I'll say it comes back to our efforts to try to help set the table as much as we can from a zoning policy perspective to enable more homes to be created. I was really encouraged by hearing the news. While it's not going to be located in Burlington, but I was really encouraged to hear the news that UVM Medical Center is going to build some apartments for their employees. And, I hope that will be, that they'll be a bit of a leader in that regard in terms of other large employers thinking about, even if it's not actually building housing, if there are other ways that they can think about supporting employees' access to housing as well. I was actually just at a conference and was hearing a lot about other efforts in big employment hubs, about similar efforts to try to really promote employers creating and helping their employees get access to housing. And so I think that's another really important thing for us to continue to think about as part of, the city's economic development work. So.
And it is where the employer assisted housing concepts, there's lots of flavors of that idea, but that really makes a direct link. There are examples of a policy that's often referred to as linkage, which Peter Clavel tried to initiate linkage, which said basically, as you create jobs, if you reach a certain scale, we're also going to expect you to contribute to a regional housing trust fund. And the trust fund is going to be used to ensure that we create housing close to the jobs, rather than having this sort of spatial mismatch where jobs are all out in the burbs and people are, living in Burlington or Winooski and having to schlep way out there to get to their jobs. So, it does beg the question about regionalism and what we can do regionally, because there's only so much that one city or, one neighborhood in a city can do in terms of meeting the growing demand that's created by new jobs. And you raised a good point there that, these jobs are something we all feel generally pretty positive about. They're high paying, they support families, people can sort of set down roots, but where are they going to set those roots down if, the average home in Burlington is now assessed at, I think it's 450, 460, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, you have another question? Or is your hands up?
He's waving.
Sandy does. so.
Sandy?
Yeah, Sandy does. Just, you can lower my hand.
I have a comment and just a couple of questions to throw out. First, some of you know I'm in real estate, some of you don't, but not to really put a damper on everything, but I haven't checked this week, but as of last week, on average, for all of Chittenden County, 19 towns, there were 50 homes available at any price range. 50. Half of them were over 600,000. We have a house around the corner from us off the top of North Street, 1,300 square feet, and it went under contract. I don't know what it'll sell at, for just under $630,000. It is jaw-dropping. There is no housing, and the housing that comes is taken up very rapidly. Most homes are going at least 50 to 100,000 over asking price. And if you're not cash, you're not in the game. And they're coming from all over the country here. So not to put a damper on it, but when you talk about housing, it is. I've never seen it, and I've only been doing this since '83. So just to let you know, I was really glad, Brian, to hear you mention one thing that I was going to ask about years ago. I was on the planning commission, the regional planning commission. And I just hadn't heard any conversation. It was all about Burlington's problems, and Burlington's going to solve the problems. We can't do it. This camp, even UVM's campus, it spreads into, South Burlington. I don't know how one does it, but we need more people at the table, Winooski, Burlington, South Burlington, to solve any of the housing problems. Burlington cannot and should not take this all on its own shoulders. And that's just a comment. Couple of quick questions. I don't know who can answer any of them. There used to be a big difference in the non-homestead rate, which helped to discourage parents from buying houses. That used to be about 22%, I think, right, Brian?
Yep.
I think that's down to what, 5 or 6%? I mean, it's almost not. So I don't know how that works, but that's just a concern, because that was one way to sort of discourage mom and dad from buying a house for Susie and Tommy. The other quick questions I have is, I don't know whether UVM has any interest, but I'd love to see it lift the dry campus status. It pushed a lot of problems into the neighborhoods. And I think that was just a really inappropriate way to solve their problems. Another couple of quick things. Does anybody have any rumors about what's going to happen with the convent on Mansfield? Anybody? It's like this is the biggest secret in town.
That thought crossed my mind in this conversation, but I don't have any information on it. I really don't.
Well, I can tell you, nobody seems to know about it. If anybody hears, please share.
Just a quick question. Is the convent empty?
Oh, it's been out. Yes.
But
Actually, you know who's using it is the school. Mater Christi's using it, I believe.
But not where the nuns lived and stuff.
I heard that was sold because Sarah Holbrook was asking about that, and it got sold right very early on after it's been sold to someone. The question is, who's it been sold to and what are they planning to do with it? But it was sold whenever, I don't know, they had a big sale of all the furniture and everything in the convent. And
I don't think it's been sold, Kathy. I think they got rid of stuff.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Because
the building itself has been sitting there vacant for quite a few years. I know one developer who took a look at it, and it was so costly to even consider bringing it up to standards. It just, he walked away from it. I think the only person that's even remotely possible would be for UVM to pick it up. And I don't know that they have any interest. It's a big property and it is vacant. And it's been vacant for a long time. Anyway, just a question, if anybody do share, if you hear about it. And the last quick thing is, when I think you're talking about working with UVM to build housing that's year round, if I hear that correctly. So that, you know, we don't have housing that's sitting empty for 3 months out of the year there. I have heard from employers and whatnot where they're bringing in temporary help, you know, that would be happy to live in some of these residential places. I don't know whether UVM can do that because there would not be students. But, you know, I walk around that campus in the summertime and it's like my private park. There's no one there. It's a big wasted amount of land and housing. Anyway, just some quick thoughts on that. And I wouldn't hold my breath that the housing market's going to improve based on the fact that rates have gone up, stock market's tanked, hasn't slowed the people flowing in here with bags of cash 1 iota, just to let you know. That's my evening summary.
It really is a disappointment to hear that, Sandy. I know we have a new planner who's been trying to find a house here in Burlington, and he's been experiencing that firsthand. So I was interested too. Again, I was just at a conference and a lot of the speakers were talking about the ways that their communities are trying to address housing. And it does sound like this issue of cash buyers and really hot markets is something that is shared among lots of communities, to the point where even some of these really successful models of workforce housing and employer assisted housing programs just aren't able to compete. And so it does feel like it's a time that we have to be more innovative and think about different ways to approach it. I don't have all the answers for what that means yet, but it's definitely something that we heard a lot about.
You know, and I think the hope is that eventually this will calm down. I think some of this, ironically, in our area is being driven by climate change. People are tired of battling, the battles, the fires in California. Maybe they want to get away from the crazy politics in certain areas. So it's not any one thing, but I can tell you that I've seen a lot of different markets in my years. I've never seen anything like this, and I don't think anyone else has, and nobody knows what to do about it. I would say that maybe take a deep breath and don't make too many decisions in this environment, because hopefully it won't be a forever thing.
The only
Richard, do you
other
have a comment?
No.
I do.
Oh, Megan.
The only thing I was going to add. Oh, sorry. I thought somebody told me to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I was just going to add, based on what Sandy just said, when she mentioned that, we've been talking a lot about Burlington and what Burlington's doing, and you're absolutely right that there are both, opportunities and challenges that we have that are bigger than just Burlington. And so the one thing that I was going to say is I know that there is a pretty large coalition of people throughout the region that are interested and are trying to focus energy around the housing challenges that we're experiencing. So I don't know if many of you have heard of the Building Homes Together campaign, which is something that the Regional Planning Commission convened. They looked at work that the Vermont Housing Finance Agency has done and are really trying to understand, what would it look like? What would it take for us to make a dent in our housing availability and affordability challenges, and have set a target for how many homes really need to be built, how many market rate homes and how many affordable homes need to be built in our entire region in order to help us solve this problem. So through their housing committee that they have at the Regional Planning Commission level, through the housing committees of individual municipalities throughout our county, I know that each one of us are trying to take whatever steps we can to try to help with that regional goal. So it was a really great point, Sandy.
I have a comment. I wanted to, I wanted to, what?
Richard's waiting.
All right.
Oh,
Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks. I've mentioned to City Council a couple of times on the topic of City Place. And I've no idea what the current situation is, so I don't know whether this is relevant, but it's an idea that I thought was a decent idea. The City Place is never going to be a neighborhood. So we ought to leverage that property for everything that we can possibly do as a city. Say, screw affordable housing requirements and the rest of it. Make sure it's environmentally good, but we don't care if they're. I don't think people really care whether they're $1 million or $3 million condos in there, but the kicker is any money that a developer makes from profiteering on not complying with affordable housing should be put in a public trust, land trust, or Champlain Housing, or something run by the city or the county. I don't know. You know the organizations, and dedicated to restoring, refurbishing, remodeling properties in the neighborhoods so that we can recreate affordable housing where people actually want it and want to live and generate vibrant neighborhoods around the city. I've never had any feedback on that, so probably everyone thinks it's a harebrained idea, but it seems to me, but it's just another way in which we can propel development forward in a way that suits everyone.
It's actually not harebrained, Richard, because it's included as a option depending on the zoning track that it's in, the census tract. I'm sorry, the census tract, not the zoning tract. There's a provision that says essentially if you have a development that is located in a neighborhood that is already has an income mix that is, let's just call it mixed income, you're allowed to do what's called a payment in lieu of developing the units on site. So that is it. I don't know if that would qualify at that location, but the idea is not completely far-fetched and is included in the current ordinance today. You can do that, the payment in lieu.
Yeah, it's a little different. I hear what you're suggesting, but it's sort of the upfront way that somebody can say, you know, instead of providing these units, I'll pay into the housing trust fund, rather than capitalizing on the profit they would make by not complying later, which is what I hear you're suggesting. So,
well, my thought is that there's a lot of dilapidated housing around in all parts of the city, and it should be in our vested interest, in our community's vested interest, to restore or refurbish these properties in a way that conforms with the 2030, 2030s, 2040s, rather than some hybrid carving up of properties that are then left to deteriorate.
yeah, and I do know that this issue too of housing quality is something that the state of Vermont's Agency of Commerce and Community Development has been thinking a lot about. So within Burlington, we have a couple of districts that are designated by the state that help bring resources to property owners, such as tax credits and other types of funding incentives that they can take advantage of to help them with, you know, creating more accessible spaces, bringing them up to code. And I know that there has been an effort in the legislature to expand some of those benefits into areas that, you know, would include some of the neighborhoods that we're talking about. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but I know the state has really been trying to put some money behind efforts to really bring properties up in terms of their overall code compliance and quality. So.
Yes, I want to kind of connect two ideas. I've been watching Quarry Hill and all the growth there, and a lot of those people there are coming into Burlington with their cars or walking to the campus. That has grown quite fast. I think probably because of the issues of vacancy, low vacancies in Burlington, and we see that on Farrell Drive, how fast that went up. And then I'm on the vestry at Cathedral of St. Paul's. You know, we do 3 Cathedral Square. And I was talking to the executive director of Cathedral Square, and I said, how come we can't take over the property of the Immaculate Conception, the cathedral for the Catholics, and build another, like we have 3 Cathedral Square at Cherry Street? And the first thing out of her mouth is it's very difficult to develop in Burlington. Is that one of our reasons why we're not developing more, is because people perceive it's very difficult to really go through the process of developing? I can't imagine how we would have got what we have now at 3 Cathedral Square on Cherry Street in the 70s if we had to do it now. I don't think we'd have questions about its height and everything else. And we've become 3 Cathedral Square, the largest independent provider of housing for seniors and disabled people.
Yeah, Keith, it's a really good point. And I'll say that I think that there is some of that sentiment about it being difficult or even impossible to build in Burlington that is true. And some of it that may be sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in ways. And that's why I know I feel like I keep saying over and over again what we're trying to do with zoning, but that is another big part of the reason why we've been trying to do the work that we've done with the Planning Commission and the City Council in the past, at least 10 years probably, is to try to identify what are those sticking points that make it difficult or impossible to build in Burlington, and are they serving us well, or are they things that we could think about altering? That this ranges anywhere from where do we require parking, how do we require, or could we require buildings to meet certain design standards in exchange for going through a lengthy kind of subjective development review process, and lots of tweaks in between. So I think that there are a lot of things on our radar that we've heard over the years that, maybe were real challenges about building in Burlington. Some of it may have to do with land cost. Some of it may have to do with just the nature of the city being largely built out. Unlike some of our neighboring communities, we don't have open green land that could easily be turned into single family development tracts. And so when you think about what the kind of complex challenges are with redeveloping in a dense core community like Burlington, they naturally come with more complications or costs, not all which need to be kind of the death of a project, but we're definitely looking at what are the things that are within our control as a community that we can try to help address to make it so that Burlington's not impossible to build in.
And predictability has real value to organizations like Kim Fitzgerald is someone I know very well, and her development director, Cindy Reed. They've been very successful at Cambrian Rise, the old St. Joseph's Orphanage on North Avenue, because they had a development partner that was able to basically lay the groundwork for that development and predictability. They knew exactly what they're going to get to build once Eric Farrell got the permits. That was, he went through that process. He took the risk. He made the upfront investment. And that was a collaborative with the city because there was this 12 acres that became essentially public land and public park on that property. So that was a great example. But it is, there's some of that is certainly true, Keith, around it being more difficult. We have a fire code requirement that is extremely demanding, and public safety is really important. So I think most of us would probably think that those requirements are really, have good value, but there's a trade-off to that. There's a real trade-off. So it's a point that's not lost myself or most of us in city government.
Any other questions? Comments?
I think Councillor Hanson might have his hand up, or is it? No, oh, there's a hand up there. Maybe you're waving.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah,
you're-
yeah. That confuses people sometimes.
I appreciate that you, 2 years into the pandemic, the hand is still there. 'Cause I've seen a lot of people get confused by that. So.
That's a Jesse.
Well, I'd like to just close this by making a comment, and that's that, you know, in Burlington, there's a lot of, in every ward, there's a lot of NIMBYism. And we are, in wards 1 and 8, you know, really pushing this housing thing pretty hard. But we're dependent on you guys to bring the city together, because there may not be a lot of large undeveloped tracts, but there are some tracts where we could add housing. One that comes to mind right off is there's some land for sale on Pine Street, on the lake side of Pine Street. I don't know, I think it's like 8 acres or something. I don't know anything about the zoning or anything. It's close to the Barge Canal. But, you know, why couldn't that become a big housing project or something, you know, like 6, 7, 8 stories with lake views? I mean, it could be quite a fabulous thing, and it's right on a major road. There's bus service there. It's walkable to a lot of places. I'm not saying that it's possible. I'm just saying that there's a lot of reasons why you would want to strongly consider something like that. But we had a presentation here either last month or 2 months ago, and people said, no, we think that should be forever wild. And so we're depending on you guys to herd all the wards together to say, look, there's trade-offs, and here's what your ward needs to contribute to make this work.
Mhm.
So I'll leave it at that.
That's a great invitation, Tom. I think we'll have to come back and discuss the rezoning of the South End with you. Because that's great.
No, but seriously,
No, really.
I was gonna say, I appreciate that point, and I appreciate you inviting us here. I know that this is not the first time Brian and I have been here, even just this year alone. So I do appreciate all the work that you all are trying to do to advance the housing conversation. And I agree. I think we're really trying to think about different areas of the city and what different areas of the city can contribute so that we're all doing something. So.
And wards 1 and 8 can start the new movement, the YIMBY movement, right? Yes, in my backyard.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us and
Thanks
for all the time
focusing on
tonight.
this. Yeah, really.
This is great.
Your focus is needed.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any
Brian,
other
again.
Yeah.
business before we close the meeting? Hearing none. I know there's an item on the agenda for locavore coupons, but I think everyone who's here actually has one.
Yes.
So we're going to, we'll do locavore next time.
Can I plug something since we're ending early?
Sure.
I just want to plug, so the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee, which I'm the chair of, we're meeting on the 23rd of this month at 5. I should be a hybrid meeting at Department of Public Works or on Zoom. But one of the big topics of conversation is going to be the sidewalk plan for the city, which is still not set in stone. We approved the funding, but the exact, streets that are going to get rehabilitated this year is not totally set in stone. And Cindy Cook and others have advocated strongly around East Ave. And so I just would welcome anyone to come to that to learn more about the process and advocate as well at that meeting.
So can you tell me the date again?
Yeah, so Tuesday, May 23rd at 5 p.m.
Okay. And you're right that I'm advocating for East Avenue, but above and beyond that, I'm advocating for a more thoughtful process in terms of how sidewalks are prioritized. And I just don't think we're there yet. And so
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're working on this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, this is definitely a space, not just for the immediate plan, but for how we do things as well. And so this will be a good, I think, conversation for that. And yeah, I hope you can make it. I hope anyone who's interested can make that.
Thanks a lot for your work, Jack. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack.
Can I say something?
Keith?
I'll say, okay, Jack, as you know, Ward A is very concerned about the redistricting. And we want our basic goal is to get a balanced community where we have accessibility to all voters, and that we feel that everyone can become a neighborhood rather than as we are right now. And so redistricting, for those of us who are living in this ward for many years or a couple years, it's one of those things we're very concerned about. We're not really feeling that we have a democratic ward right now.
Yep, totally understand that.
Not a capital D, I'm talking about a representative democracy.
Yeah, of course, yeah, no, I totally understand that. And we are gonna have, I believe at our next council meeting on the 23rd, we're gonna have a report back. I don't know if Megan left or not, but on potential ways forward with redistricting, both looking at draft maps, but also configurations, because we haven't made any decisions about the size of the council or the maps. So thanks for sharing that. I definitely agree and hear that. And it's very much a live issue and coming up at our next meeting. So please, if you can make it, please do.
All right, well, thanks
Thank you.
everyone for participating, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
Thanks, Keith.
Good night.